but they don't know who Danny is. Okay, so hey, back streaming again. We're here with Danny. What's going on? We were asking him all about, I guess we were currently talking about D&D and board games and how 3D printers can be used for all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we were.
All right.
Oh, we were actually starting to go into what we've been playing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Rob's
I was
telling
talking
us
about
all
kid
about
games.
his poop games. That's what crashed the internet.
Well,
It was too much to
So-
handle.
I won't talk about it because I don't want to crash the internet. But played kid games. Life is good, and I'm excited to soon one day adult again.
Nice. Yeah, for sure. Hey, but playing games with your kids is important.
Oh no, I love playing games with my kids. Don't get me wrong, but the only issue with my daughters is like we'll get fixated on a game and we will play that game over and 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 over
Oh, yeah,
and
for
over
sure.
and over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So
How old's your daughter, Rob?
I've got a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old,
Nice.
and they are both very much in charge, and they remind Daddy on a daily basis that I'm not in charge. But it's okay. I love them. They just have to give me that look, and I'm like, yes, I'll buy it, whatever you want. But anyway, so
That's your role
Yeah.
as a dad.
Yeah.
boom. How about you, Matt? Have you played anything, sir?
Yeah, I actually had to play Modern Art.
I love that game.
Yeah, sat down, learned it. We were a bit crunched for time, so we weren't sure if we were going to be able to get it in. But we sat down, we played it. It was a bit of a rocky start because we were all busy looking at our phones. But then it took off very quickly, and we got really into it, man. It surprised me with how good it was. I love the fact that in Modern Art, it's basically just a game of auctions, but there are 5 different types of auctions depending on what cards you play, so there's like a lot of variability as to what's coming up.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting to see play out because you leave the cards in front of you, so you know what people might be going for. The end of the round always triggers at a very specific time, so you know what you have in your hand, so you know when you can end the round. And there's a lot there. It's pretty crunchy for something very simple and very fast. So
That's awesome.
had a good time.
I played more Dice Throne, which is that like Yahtzee-ish battle game. It's fun. It's like very light and silly. But I'm missing our D&D game. Like, hopefully we can get that back together soon.
Yeah.
My bad.
Do you guys all play together?
We
We
have
do.
an online D&D game that we play because I used to be in Winston-Salem with them, but now
Yeah.
I'm down in Homestead.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have someone in Las Vegas that we play with. And where's Adam
Nice.
now? I know he used to be.
He's in Michigan still.
Oh, he's still in Michigan. Oh, he just moved to a
He
different
just
part of
moved
Michigan.
more west of Detroit.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. So yeah, we're all over the U.S., but we play a game together, and we actually haven't been able to play in a while. So I would like to play more D&D stuff.
I hear you, man.
What about your D&D game, man? I know I don't know that you talk about like the story or what's going on in your campaign much. I know you just talk about 3D printing stuff. How's your game going?
Yeah, so I started like officially playing D&D about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was the DM because I was in our group of friends. I was the one who I guess was most exposed to D&D in the past, and I like dabbled in it and was comfortable with it. And so I kind of dove in and I started watching Matt Colville and
Yeah.
you know, like a lot of the big D&D people. But I think the ones that had like the biggest influence on me, like and how I wanted to run my game, was like Matt Colville and Runehammer or Drunkens and Dragons at the time.
Oh, nice.
And I was the DM, so we ran through Lost Mines of Fendelver. It took us forever because we played like 2-hour sessions. And after Lost Mines of Fendelver, we did like a little homebrew, and we did that until last year. I want to say until like June of last year, right before I started kind of diving in deep into the Kickstarter, because one of our players went on maternity leave.
Oh, great.
And I call it maternity leave, but she was about to give birth to a baby, and then she needed some time to like recover before we started playing weekly again, and then get used to baby and get baby used to schedule.
And the baby had to roll up a character and all that stuff.
Yeah, like, and so I kind of wrapped up the little like campaign arc that we'd been playing for several months, and in my mind as DM, like had like a little montage of all the good moments of my players together and me, and it was just tender. And so I've been printing a lot of stuff just to kind of show certain things on the channel, but I haven't really like run my own game for a long time. So we just recently started playing with one of my players as the DM, and I'm probably out of desire to start DMing again. I might start, writing up a campaign in the future or something. I kind of got a lot going on right now, so I'm kind of glad that I don't have to be running the ship right now.
Yeah, DMing's super interesting because it's like it's fun because you get to help lead the story and see how the characters are going to interact with it, but you also have a lot of prep work you have to do to get everything in place. So.
And I mean, I really enjoyed that, and I enjoy like sly flourish and a lot of the like kind of like minimalist DM approaches. But for me, the big thing was just kind of having as many like engaging moments for my players that if at least they didn't remember, I sure did.
Oh yeah.
And that's pretty much what I 3D print for. And it's not practical to print like a whole throne room every time your players are gonna go speak with the king. But if they're gonna fight the king in a climactic ending, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like
yeah.
I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna have moments. I'm gonna print out huge minis of these like abominations breaking through the walls, and I'm gonna do that stuff that is gonna be fun. Like, cause you know what? Like that's worth it to me, and that's an extra element of like satisfaction for me as like a creative person. So I enjoyed them both very much. They complement each other, like the intellectually satisfying feeling of like getting a good encounter together mechanically, and making something with my hands, paint, and putting on the table, and my players be like, oh, this is pretty cool, dude. Like, it was very satisfying.
Our current DM is literally just trying to kill us. In fact,
he's in the chat right now talking about how much he wants to kill all of our characters.
Our characters just got to sleep. We finally got to do a long rest after 4 days. 4 days.
It was rough.
It was rough. I mean, we tried to go to sleep at one point, and then all of a sudden all this stuff started coming about, and then it never stopped, and then it never stopped, and then never stopped, and never stopped. And so, yeah, like, to say that we were beyond exhausted as characters, and we were down to, like, spit spells. Like, what can I do? Can I
I'm a melee character, so I wasn't hurting as bad, but all you guys who have magic skills and spell slots and stuff, you're just like, I can't do anything now. I can literally just walk up to somebody and like try to smack them.
I mean, I could still hit people and things like that, but my super attacks and things like that require those spells. Yeah, it was not good. So I'm excited when we start our campaign back up again. My guy will have actually napped. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear what you do, Danny. I would also like Roy and Adam to take note. I like this idea of...
I'm about the story and having the characters have fun and trying to encourage them to utilize their characters in interesting ways and create memorable moments. Adam just wants to kill us. But he did give you a Gundam suit, so...
Yeah, but then he blew it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got this awesome Gundam suit because they were
like
trying to take my mom's tooth. And you don't
game?
take my mom's tooth. I told you not to touch my mom's tooth. And
I don't even know what our game is. I'm pretty sure the game that Adam's running is like some sort of crazy cyberpunk game. It is not cyberpunk, but like steampunk.
For sure, yeah.
And it had some steampunk elements because then the goblins had like their steampunk monster come out and
Like
stuff
we had
like
an
that.
Airship and we had like mech robot Gundam things.
To be fair, the airship was a boat that I flew.
Yeah, the airship. Yeah, it literally is a boat that has a magic staff that can pick up any object, and so we use it on the boat to fly.
That we also crashed and wrecked.
Yeah.
I mean, look, sometimes
We were getting chased by 3 megalodon sharks, bro.
Oh, no big deal, man. poke them in the eyes.
Do you
know?
have 3D printer SDLs from Megalodon sharks? That's the real question.
I could guarantee you I could find you something that would proxy just perfectly.
There you go, Adam. Adam's been saying it's really hard for him to resist buying a 3D printer since he's seen all the things that I've been posting about it.
Oh,
I've
yeah,
actually had it. I'm sure you get that constantly. Everybody's just like, oh my goodness, I need this printer. I'm getting this printer now because of you. So
It's not constant, but it happens, and
well, I'll be another one. I got this 3D printer because of you from watching your channel. So
that makes me so happy, Roy. I mean, honestly, like, I feel like if I can do it, if I can learn, I'm totally not techie. I'm not like mechanically inclined, and like I break stuff all the time on my printers. Just I'm not one of those guys that like. Like, oh yeah, I got my printer running and it hasn't broken on me in like 10 months. It's amazing. And that's not my experience, but I still love it. Like, I still like have learned so much. You know, I learned to solder the first time like a few months ago, and like, so that tells you something, that a guy who has a YouTube channel like can learn to solder like a year into it and still be okay. Like,
yeah.
So I mean, and I enjoy it enough that I think it's easy. It's easy for me to talk about it and kind of share it as a hobby with other people. I think if I didn't, then you guys would know.
Yeah. So how did you get into 3D printing in the first place? Like, what was it that made you want to jump into it and then utilize it to create stuff for D&D?
So I think, you know, just being in the D&D community and like on the D&D subreddit, I always saw Miguel Zavala's models all the time. And he was like the first exposure that I had to like D&D, like monsters, because I was really into miniatures. So I started buying like Reaper bones because they were the most affordable.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, in my homebrew campaign, I needed like an intellect devour. And if you've ever tried looking up an intellect devour mini on Amazon, they're like $8 for a little mini plus shipping. Like, good luck finding a cheap one, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had a friend who was an engineer who had like a little monoprice mini, and I was like, hey man, can you print me up a couple of models? And I had him print me up some of Miguel's bandits and some of Miguel's intellect devour. And I printed them and I painted them, and then I was like, can you print me some more? He's like, yeah, dude, this is like a cent in filament. And I was like, so you're willing to print me more? And he was like, yeah, man, like no problem. And I was like, so then he printed me up like a bunch of other scatter and stuff like that, and I pinned them, and like my players saw me putting them on the table, and I'd already been crafting, but still like they saw I was really into it, and I just showed it off, and I was just so happy with it. And for my birthday, they all kind of pitched in, and they all put a little bit of money towards buying me a 3D printer, and they got me a
crazy.
CR10.
Aw.
It was amazing.
That's really awesome. That's good people right there.
Yeah, dude, like they did it for me, and I was honestly like, it took me 1 month before I got anything that I could print. Like before I got my first benchy, before I got my first anything, and my prints looked really bad for a long time, but they were good enough for me. And I was like, I felt like, you know, Dr. Frankenstein, like it's alive, you know. Yeah. And at the time, you know, they did their research and they got me a CR10 because it was honestly the best choice for what they got for me. But I stuck through it because my players got it for me and they believed in me. I didn't want to return the gift that they like did, so I stuck through it, and I'm so glad I did. And then I just you know, started consuming a lot of like the 3D printing content on YouTube because that's how I learn best generally, and found a lot of really awesome channels and kind of found this 3D printing community. And yeah, little by little had, you know, started to learn different modelers and meet different people and like a couple of different Facebook groups, and really on Reddit, printed minis was like my community at the time. Like that's where I felt most of the really good stuff was going on, and it's awesome over there. But that's how I got started, Roy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I just stumbled, like I've always wanted like 3D printers and stuff, but I never thought I could afford something like that, because I'm like, oh, 3D printers, everybody thinks, oh man, they're just so expensive, like how could you ever get a 3D printer? But like people don't know that's the prices on certain machines, or you can get really good stuff. Like I know you talked a lot about the Ender 3, and like the suggestion of getting that was what made me like jump on board with that. And like watching your videos and a bunch of other people's stuff, I was just like, oh man, I need to get in on this, because there's so much stuff on Thingiverse to print out for just tabletop games in general, whether it be D&D or board games or miniatures games. Like if you want to print terrain for miniatures games, there's just tons of that stuff. So I was like, oh man, this is crazy. And I don't know, just watching all that stuff made me feel more confident to actually like jump in. And I've actually haven't had too many issues with it, which has been pretty crazy.
I think a lot of it honestly is like when I first reviewed the Ender 3 and I bring up like some criticisms of it, some issues with it, like review for a printer like doesn't last longer than a few months, generally speaking, because the manufacturers make a lot of changes, and they don't tell you what version of the printer you're getting. But if you're buying it pretty new from Amazon, you know, you're probably getting a pretty new printer.
Right.
And so like the Ender 3, lots of quality control issues got fixed. And even then, like the issues that it has, you know, are fixable and or not concerning to me personally. So, but the quality you can get out of it, if, like I said, like it's a simple machine, and it's pretty easy to fix in the world of 3D printers, and it's pretty simple, and the parts, the parts to repair it are cheap if something does go wrong, and there's so many resources. So like, you know, I mean, I talk about like, I honestly have like a list of like 50 videos that I could talk about at any time if I wanted to just dedicate time to do it. It's just, I obviously don't have the time to make 50 videos. And that's just like talking about minis and terrain and stuff. Like the big YouTube channels talk about like kind of a different network of things 3D printing related, because it's such a broad umbrella, dude. And it's a better time than ever because it is really cheap. You can get into 3D printing for less than an Xbox, a Switch, a PS4 without games or controllers for reference, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
because the Ender 3 is around like $200 basically, and you can find it cheaper than that some places.
Where did you get yours at, Roy? Did you get it on
I got mine
Amazon?
on Amazon, like on Cyber Monday. So it was like, I think it was like 170 something.
Yeah.
But then since I was moving down here, I didn't open it until like I was moved into this place. I literally only opened it like 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. But I had all that time like having the printer, and just since I couldn't open it, I just ended up watching tons and tons of videos, which I think ended up helping me out a lot, because like by the time I actually opened the box, like I knew how to build the thing, you know. I knew like what a bunch of people said about it and like a bunch of things to look for, and like I already had Cura and like your miniatures and stuff, like profiles for the Ender 3 already like downloaded onto it. So there's like certain, I guess it's just like settings, right? You can there's like save files for the settings, and you can like download other people's save files for the settings, and I just like pop that in, and that's what I use, and I haven't had any issues, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's so to explain for the people that like don't really get how 3D printers work. So you take software called a slicer, and you'll put like a digital model into the slicer, and then you will the slicer will basically look at those settings, which is things like how hot do you want the bed, which is where the plastic goes on, how hot do you want the plastic to come out, you know. And all those things affect whether the print has blobs or whether the wall is perfectly straight and doesn't have any artifact like waviness in it, you know, everything from, you know, whether it's dimensionally accurate. And so the reason people say it's a tinkerer's hobby is because when you look at those settings, they can be extremely overwhelming. And that's why a profile, which is what you're talking about, Roy, is like so helpful, because yes, you can start while you're dipping your toes in. You can use somebody else's settings that work well for them, and just press a button that loads it into your slicer. And all you need to do is make sure mechanically your machine is sound, and generally it works pretty well, except for a couple of things like changing maybe temperature and some other things. You know, if you demand perfection, you're going to spend a lot longer tweaking the settings that you get. But I'm not a perfectionist in any of the hobbies that I participate in. So I'm happy. Like, you know, like, what can I say?
Yeah.
And I've posted some pictures on my Instagram of a bunch of the stuff I've been able to print so far, and it's pretty crazy because I mean we play a lot of board games that come with big fancy nice miniatures in it, and like once I printed out one of the dragons you had sent me, and basically it ended up looking just as good as any of the miniatures that end up in a lot of these really expensive board games that we end up buying. Granted, buying a 3D printer and printing out, like getting all that stuff set up is probably more expensive than one of those board games, but once you get it, the filament relatively isn't expensive at all. Like once you have it all set up. I mean, everybody keeps asking me, oh, like how much does it cost to print something like that? And I'm like, not much, you know? It's like printing like little miniature like humanoid things is like cents, you know? And like a dragon's like $1, you know? It's like crazy. So
somebody question in chat was asking a spool of thread for it. How many minis would you say that would print?
Okay, so let me
do some math real quick for you, because it depends on. You're right. I would say common size is 1 kilogram, right? Mm-hmm. And average, I mean, a mini takes anywhere from 6 grams to 10 grams. So if you want to round it up and be conservative, 100 minis.
Okay,
And a spool of filament costs, anywhere from $15 to $25. So, like I just printed these guys that I can find somewhere. I don't want to get up and be rude, but like I'm not gonna get up and be rude, but I
printed out this tiny little dragon.
How dare you, sir?
I printed out, what's this, the red guardian dragon or something like that? The wing was on there, but as my internet broke, I must have hit it and it fell off. But
Roy's fury.
It literally was my fury. I wasn't very happy.
You printed so cute and so little, like.
So the problem is, like, I thought it was gonna be bigger. So this is 40%. I guess all the different dragons aren't necessarily the same size. So I was like, oh, I printed the other one at 40%, and it was still pretty big. Let me print this one at 40%. No, it's teeny tiny. And so I actually have it printing back there again. At a much higher size, but it's like, this is gonna be the baby dragon. But it still looks really cool. Like regardless, I mean, you can literally have the same file be a baby dragon or be a giant, elder dragon, which is kind of crazy because you just up and raise or lower the size. You can decide how thick you want it to be or how hollow you want it to be, so you could use more filament by making it solid and just like a big mass of plastic, or you could thin that out and make the infill a lot smaller, just depends on how you want to do it.
So I'm seeing different enders on here. Is there one in particular?
It's the 3 or whatever is the normal one that's the one that I have.
So yeah, there's the 3, there's the 3X, which I believe just comes with like a glass plate, and then there's the 3 Pro, which has some modifications to make it a more sturdy frame at the bottom, and also comes, I believe, with a improved PSU, a power supply unit. So honestly, man, like, those other things are nice to have, because the regular Ender 3, if you just set it up mechanically, it prints perfectly fine. I mean, if I am going to be rude, give me 1 second.
Yeah. No, you're fine. Bro, I'm looking on Amazon right now, and I see the Creel T 3D upgraded Ender 3 Pro 3D printer, and then I see the Congro Creel T Ender 3D printer with aluminum DIY.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's just like add-on stuff. Like if you just get like a regular Ender 3, that's basically what I have. So it's like without any add-ons, without any stuff. And a lot of people are like, oh, print out this mod or that mod to change it. And I'm like, I want to see how much I can do without upgrading it at all, Because I mean, since I'm trying to do like board game stuff with it and like shout it out, I don't want to like upgrade my thing a whole bunch of different ways and be like, whoa, you need this and you need that. I want to see what I can do.
I just want to do simple board game stuff.
You don't need any mods on it, honestly. Like, those are nice to haves, and there's some that are nice quality of life improvements, don't get me wrong, but I run nude printers and I'm perfectly fine. I've never had an issue because they weren't nude, So like, look,
See, that's
This-
immense.
Jeez.
This dragon, I printed this on the Ender 3, and it needs some cleanup. But like from your guys' perspective, I'm not like zooming in super close on this. And honestly, dude, like this is gonna look really cool on my table once I print it up, dude. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna look great. And if you want to nitpick, you could look at it and see the imperfections in it, sure. But like that's gonna look great. And even these guys, I printed these minis. Little guys. Let me see if it focuses on them. But like a little dwarf and little, it doesn't look very good from this perspective with this cam. But those guys cost me 10 cents, and so when I put them on the table, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
They won't be resin quality. Just being real,
But they'll be 10-cent quality, and they'll still look that good. Like,
yeah,
I'm
better than-
happy to make
better
the
than
one
dice.
investment now, to then in the future, 10 cents. Because like like on Kickstarters and stuff now, when you get these games, everything's cardboard, and then if you unlock a certain stretch goal, that's when they give you the nice components
yeah.
type of thing. Well, why not then just from my thought process is, well, let me buy the retail version that's going to be simpler and cheaper, and then if I have the 3D printer, I can print off all of those, extra components that they're talking about, and save myself time and money.
Yeah, there's tons of different tokens and things for things on Thingiverse. Like, I printed a giant card stand. Like, this is Arkham Horror, the card game. I know it's probably hard to see, but
No, I can see it.
there's like tentacles and stuff like that holds up all the cards. It's like a Lovecraftian card game.
Dude, that's awesome.
And it's got like a little space for all the little tokens in there and stuff. There's so much crazy stuff that's on Thingiverse that's board game related. Like I printed out, I don't know if you've heard of the game Pandemic, but it has all these little cubes for the viruses. Someone has made like actual like geometric shapes for each of the viruses.
Yeah, what did Z think about that?
Dude, I literally made it for him. It was funny because I made something for Tom, and Z's like, oh, you hadn't printed anything out for me. And I'm like, you don't know that, because I'd been printing out these Pandemic things. It's 4 different colors. So, like, I'd been printing out for, like a couple weeks now, like one of each color at a time. I'm like, you don't know that I haven't made you anything. But I handed it to him, and he was like, what? I was like, I got to get pictures with it, because I asked him to bring in his copy, because I don't have a copy of the game, but I wanted to take pictures of it on the board, and he was flipping out, and we were at work. He's like, I just want to stop work so I can go play Pandemic with these awesome virus cubes. And it's just cool, like the way that the presentation of a game on the table, like a 3D printer can just make you be more immersed in the game,
Yeah.
Even with D&D, whether it be D&D or board games or miniatures games, just having these 3D representations of what's going on in the game could just make you feel more like you're there,
Absolutely.
Which is kind of what we all want, because we play these games to escape and play these games to have fun with our friends. So it's just really cool to do stuff, and it's really cool to bring something out like this and be like, hey, my friends, look what I made, or like, hey, I make people stuff. Like, I've been having just as much fun making other people's stuff as I've been having like making stuff for myself,
I absolutely understand. That's kind of like my mission statement, if you will, is help people kind of have the confidence to give it a shot and make their games better, because it's made me happier. Like, what can I say? And like I said, if I can do it, I know a lot of other people can too. So, but yeah,
you
man.
Give me hope, because I am not that type of person.
Yeah,
I'm not a mechanic
you can do it,
or
man.
tech or anything like that. And so, if you can do it, Danny, man, I feel great now.
You're like, if this guy can do it, goodness. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So, as far as what you would recommend for 3D printing, would you still say like Ender 3 is the best bet, or is it better to save up for more, or what do you think would be good for somebody looking to begin in getting something to print out stuff for games?
So let me first say that there's no such thing as a perfect printer.
Right.
Pretty much under any condition. So, if you, I think an Ender 3 is a really solid bet, especially for our usage, which is like board games and stuff like that. You could get the Big Brother, which is a CR10, which is what I got originally, and that pretty much just has more space. So if you want to print like really big things, or you don't want to glue anything together, then that's a good
dragon
option.
that you showed us, that
Yeah.
gray one, Was that on an Ender 3 or a
Yeah.
CR10?
It was on an Ender 3.
Okay.
But I'll tell you right now, quality-wise, you can get the same exact quality on both of those printers, especially for prints of this size.
Got
Of
it.
this size. You know, this fits the entire build volume of the Ender 3. It's bigger than this. So, like, you can get some pretty big stuff. We're talking, like, I think a CR10 is probably better for people who want cosplay props and don't mind a little bit of glue because it's not that much smaller. I mean, we're talking about 80 millimeters on the X and Y, and I believe 50 millimeters on the Z. So it's not that much when you really think about it, when you're talking about a lot more space and a lot less compact machine. But Roy, again, like, I pretty much recommend an Ender 3 because of how much support is available online. You know, if you do your research and look up like videos on it and stuff, you'll be prepared for some of the issues that come up sometimes. And there's like a billion assembly videos. And so the one that I think is better than the others that I've seen is by Tom Tullis, Fat Dragon Games. He has a couple of things in there that I think are really good that a lot of other channels kind of have buried in their assembly videos because they're very long or they're live streams or different things like that. And so, but I digress. I'm rambling here, Roy.
I do want to say when I was assembling mine, I watched a video from this channel called 3D Printed Tabletop on YouTube. I watched his assembly video when I put mine together. So
I did my best, but remember that when I did my printer, when I assembled my printer, it was an older model, and some of the things didn't say that I'm like, hey, watch out for this. Like, they fixed.
Yeah,
you know, I just recently bought a new Ender 3, and my assembly video is out of date, like, you know, a year later. Yeah. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast, man. Honestly, kind of why I'm going away from doing so many printer reviews. I'm doing one now because some of the backers for my Kickstarter asked me to do more printer reviews, so I'm doing it for them. But for the most part, it's not the type of content that I really feel satisfied making, you know?
Gotcha. You want more like widely available content and talking to people in the community, basically, right?
Yeah, man. Like that's what I'm happy with, Roy. Like I'm happy kind of shining a spotlight on modelers in the community who might not have a way to share their models that I think deserve it. And I'm here to build the community and get people excited for different usages. And I want somebody coming to my channel to feel like they're inspired because of the things that they can do as opposed to the technology that they might get frustrated with. You know what I mean?
Now, speaking of the different model people or the people that do it, is it how difficult or what type of background do you need to create your own model, right? Like your Kickstarter that you did for your dragons.
Yeah.
I would imagine the majority of them, if not all of them, were original to your designs, right? So do you need, and if they weren't, do you need a special type of computer program to be able to create your own stuff? Or like, all right, we're talking about D&D and 3D printing and stuff like that. My guy's a Dragonborn, but I play with this like huge great axe, right? And so I may want to 3D print my own Dragonborn that has the big axe that I like, rather than just the standard file.
Sure,
what does that look like?
Okay, so a couple of questions in there. There are, so like my dragons, I worked with different, I didn't do the sculpting myself. I was kind of like the art director, if you want to consider it that way. So I worked with a concept artist to make dragons that we designed together. And then I took that and I gave it to the sculptors. Many of them were like already active members of the community, so I kind of knew who I was working with. And we made these dragons together with like lots of back and forth feedback. And so that process would take anywhere from 1 to 2 months. And that's slow by industry standards. You know, sculpt usually is done within 2 weeks to a month, including the art. And so anyways, for somebody like you, in your case of wanting like a Dragonborn with an axe, there's a ton of options. I mean, honestly, there are like sculpts that people have made of like Dragonborn. And Miguel Zavala, the guy that I talked about, has made an incredible amount. Like he's in like, I think he's over 800 sculpts at this point that he's made, and like a ton of minis. Like he makes them for his patrons.
Made, like, basically everything in the monster manual too, right?
Yes, he has. I mean, he's on Tomb of Annihilation right now. So I mean, he's gone current all the way through. So like pretty much if you want to run any D&D adventure through Tomb of Annihilation, he's made a mini for it. Even if there's no mini that exists in any other thing, he just made one. So like if you want a Dragonborn with a specific great axe, you could look for Miguel's files and see if you find one. If you don't like that, you could go onto like a website called Desktop Hero 3D, which is like a character builder, which you need absolutely zero technical skills. It's like a character creator.
Yeah.
It's a little rough around the edges right now because they just launched a Kickstarter to update their UI, right? They're working on that. But then you have Hero Forge, which is a very popular website. It costs you like $10 for a mini, but they're very stylized. They're very cool looking. You could print them pretty well on an Ender 3 still and get the custom mini that you want if you're willing to pay $10 for the mini. And then finally, if you want to like design your own model, you can download a ton of free programs and just start learning to sculpt. But that's going to have the longest learning curve, and you might not have the artistic bone. Exactly. So
I always want to do that sort of thing because I felt like I could make tokens for games pretty easy. Because I can do graphic design, and I'm like, I could make tokens for games. I don't know that I could sculpt things. But Matt, you have like some.
Yeah, a token would take you minutes probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. In high school,
Matt, do you have a 3D printer?
I don't have one now.
But you
I originally
like
wanted
CAD
to be,
stuff, right?
Yeah, I originally wanted to be like an architectural engineer a long time ago, back in my youth. So, I used things like 3ds Max and Rhino and Blender and stuff like that to get stuff. But it's been a while, so I'm a bit out of practice. But it is a bit of a learning curve if you were just trying to go into it blind. Just because it's sort of like when you open up Photoshop and you're like, I'm going to make a picture. And then you open it up and you're like, ooh, what's all this stuff? This doesn't look like paint at all. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff, and honestly, you don't even need the majority of it to do stuff. Like, to make a token, you would literally just create a cylinder and then size it to the thickness you want, and then go in and etch down the rest of it if you wanted to. I mean, it wouldn't. I don't even know. It's something like that would be super straightforward. But like, I imagine trying to get into like 3D Max or something and try to sculpt out a dragon would take actual know-how to get done, because
you'd start with stick figures and go from there.
Yeah.
But that, and that's a misconception I think a lot of people have, Matt, is like that you need to know sculpting. Honestly, maybe 5 years ago that would have been the case if you really wanted to get like good use out of at that point it was like $500 3D printers. But nowadays, man, there are like every day there's new people making models of like every single kind of every single type of board game, and Thingiverse has more and more models. Like even with multiple printers, like my issue isn't that I don't have the models that I need. My issue is that I don't have time to print everything that I want to print.
Yeah.
And I am not the only person, because people talk about like the addiction. You'll get a printer, you'll want another one just to keep churning stuff out faster. And it's just
I was saying, like, those app games that have like timers to when you can play them again. It's like those games like, oh, you can only play this game. Like, you ran out of crystals. Now you got to wait until you can play again. That's exactly what having a 3D printer is like, because you get something on your printer. It's printing. Like, I have a dragon back there printing. And I'm like, okay, I know the dragon's going to be up at this time. I know the next thing I want to take is this much time. How can I get that off and the next thing on as fast as possible to utilize the time that I have? And then immediately when that's done, it's like, what's the next thing I'm printing? I gotta print another thing because I don't want to waste time.
Yep. And
it doesn't hurt it though, not giving it a break.
No. Let it go, baby. Have it printing 24/7. That's the magic. You won't want to stop, Rob. You won't want to stop.
one of the things that I'd like you to talk about is like the amount of time it takes to print different things, because I think that's one thing that people don't really understand too when they're not into it.
So I have a video where I talk about how much it costs to print things and how long it takes to print those things is something I talk about. I mention. Generally, like for example, this little dragon that I did here, and this is mini for scale. Right, this little dragon here, he's smaller in size because I didn't scale him correctly, but he took me probably about half a day. This dragon here took me about 24 hours in total.
Is that one big dragon? How was he? A whole spool?
It's multiple pieces. No, this dragon cost me like $3 in total.
Shut up.
Yeah. So the fire is one piece. The head is one piece. This neck is a separate piece. The body is another piece. The two wings are a separate piece. These arms are a piece. These back legs are a piece. And this one, we're gonna hopefully change this, but these these legs are pieces, and then this bottom part is a piece, and then the tail is a piece. So each piece might take just 1 or 2 hours. Like, doesn't take that long, but when you add everything up over time, there's so many pieces, removing the support from them and then gluing them, it seems more tedious than it is, but for me, it takes a lot more work for me to clean up like my Warhammer figures off the spool and glue them all together than it does to just get in the habit of just removing everything and being done with it. That's just me though. You know what I mean?
I think that's awesome. And it's cool because, like, as far as, like, printing those things out and orienting those things and all that stuff, like, if you're interested in doing miniatures at all, you should definitely check out Danny's YouTube channel, because you go over a lot of different things and, like, supports and, like, orienting the miniature specific way and the cost of things. And a lot of that stuff is the thing that convinced me, like, okay, I need this, buy it now, because I felt like I had the information at that point after I've watched your whole channel, so it's like I felt like I knew, like I gleaned a lot of your experience from watching that stuff, so I didn't have to make the same mistakes, you know. So it's pretty cool.
And I'm glad you enjoy it, Roy. And more than anything, like I do my best. I want to answer questions that I think a lot of people have. And so, you know, like Rob talking to you, like there's been multiple times where like I'm like, yeah, I covered that in the video, and I'm glad I did, because I think these are common questions. And my channel started with talking about like misconceptions that people have about 3D printing, and it started from like a philosophical place, which is in the crafting community, where people like are hand making props for their D&D games. There's like a monthly debate, like, is 3D printing crafting? Like, that's a thing. And people are really like divided in the crafting community about whether it is or whether it isn't. And, you know, there's a lot of misinformation that gets presented in those videos. And I think like 3D modeling is its own hobby, and 3D printing those models is its own hobby too. And that's the only reason I have like content for days, because dude, there's just a lot to talk about and not enough time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I like it all, and I enjoy it. This is cool, man. Like the fact that I can like have a dragon like this in half a day if I wanted to push it is like it's fulfilling. It's really neat, and I feel more attached to this little dragon than I do any of the Reaper Bot minis that I have, just because I feel like I saw this thing come to life.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I printed out, what is it, the Ice Dragon alternate sculpt or something like that is the one that I printed out. And I mean, I work with guys that they've been doing stuff in the board game / tabletop industry for 10 plus years, like being in media. And I like handed it to them, and I was like, check this out. And they're like, oh, it looks cool, really nice paint job and everything. I'm like, that's from my printer. And they're like, what? Because they knew I was 3D printing all this stuff, and they knew that miniatures game, I make like miniatures games and I paint stuff. But the realization that like, oh snap, like you can print that out, like what? That's crazy.
Totally.
I mean, it's been really interesting because there's not a whole lot of board game people that have gotten onto the 3D printer thing. But there's one game that I really like, Zaya. They actually released an expansion that had a whole bunch of ships, but they didn't actually it wasn't a thing you could just buy. You just print off the different ship boards, and then they gave you the STL files to print out the ships. And that's awesome. This was back before I actually had a printer, and I knew a friend that had access to a printer. I was like, hey, can you print those ships for me? And just the fact that like there was an expansion for a board game that could be printed out just seemed so cool to me at the time. And that was like 3 years ago. So it'd be really cool to see more companies like taking advantage of the things you could do. You could just put out like DLC content. Like, hey, I mean, honestly, like a couple bucks, I'll download a scenario and a new miniature to add into it. Like, I would do that all day long. That would be awesome.
I'd love to do that one day for companies. And I think like I think people are really afraid of releasing STLs into the community because they feel afraid of the piracy, and they feel afraid of like the what ifs that will happen, and they feel like they're going to lose the revenue stream that comes by making physical minis. But like the supply chain for physical mini is generally like insane, and having a limited run, if you don't know the demand that your mini is going to command, like I get why it's scary, but like we're a growing community of people 3D printing stuff for board games, and every day it becomes like bigger and bigger, you know? And so, dude, the fact that happened 3 years ago is amazing, because I literally have found one game that it's a Deep Wars, and it's like I guess I just heard about this game recently because the company released some of their like resin cast terrain pieces online for STL format. And they're like, hey, we just found out that there's like people that want to print our stuff for our game, and we're willing to share these files with you. And the community reacted really warmly to it because they're like, I hope that other companies see this and do it. And I agree with that. But I think if you're going to release digital files for 3D printing like your game in like resin or something like that, then you kind of have to think about that from the very beginning. And I don't think that it can necessarily require minis in order to be successful. Just be a nice perk. Yeah. But we'll see, man. Honestly, like this is the wild, wild west, man. Like we're still an emerging market in many ways, and you know, every day I'm surprised at the things that happen and kind of the emerging market and what's happening. You know.
Did you ever see that documentary, Printing the Legend?
No, I haven't.
That Netflix documentary. It talks about 3D printers. And it goes in multiple angles of the 3D printers. It follows a couple of startup companies, and one of them changed from being like this cool indie retro startup company to now like this corporate company. And a lot of the people that originally started with them all left because it got so corporate and got other things like that. But when I knew you were coming on, I was like, oh man, I want to know if he's seen that documentary, because it then goes even deeper. Into some stuff which we won't get into, but it you know, the printing off of weapons and other things like that, like real life stuff, you know. So it talks about 3D printing in the whole. But one of the things that's cool about where we live, speaking about 3D printers, is here in Winston-Salem we have the leading doctor/scientist in the United States, Dr. Atala, when it comes to printing off organs, like living organs and skin and things like that. And one of the things that they're able to do, just like not even 2 miles from my house, is there's a huge research program going on right now for ALS, and they'll print off a liver, and then they'll attach ALS to it, and they'll try to figure out ways to combat it and things like that. But
that's just crazy. The science behind that. And I mean, I've heard of that before too, like them doing all that different stuff.
Yeah, I was just saying how that came about. But sorry, go ahead.
There's all sorts of like use, like, you know, case scenarios where you can use a 3D printer for things outside of tabletop gaming.
Wait, there are other things outside of tabletop gaming? No, I'm just kidding.
We could go on for days about like the practicality, and I think like the 3D printing revolution that people talked about, like one's going to be in every home. I'm not sure if like that. I'm not sure if that's really gonna be like happening. Like people talked about it, but
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
there's so many like super niche uses that are like being democratized. Like RC World, they care big about it. Doll houses use it. You know, us in tabletop games use it. Whether it's for like 40K or whether you use it for D&D, or whether you use it for Pathfinder. You know, just every day, like somebody finds a new creative thing. It's a new tool. I think that's made it a lot easier for
They're
people to
actually
kind of.
printing out houses now, concrete
Yeah.
houses
Oh, yeah. I
that
saw
they
that
use
sort
a
of
3D
thing.
printer for.
Yeah.
And did you hear about the mission to Mars? One of the things that they're wanting to do when they get to Mars, and one of the things that they're practicing now, is they actually have a 3D printer that will print off metallic fuselages.
Wow.
And so when they get to Mars, they'll be able to print out the new parts and components that they need that were used up and burned up, on the launch and then the ascension or descension into Mars. They'll have the equipment there. So instead of needing a whole brand new ship to, send a ship first and then have all the stuff, they'll be able to print it off there to be able to fly back. The only thing they'll need is like the fuel, but it's just this whole 3D printing thing. I agree with you. I don't know if it'll necessarily be. How about this? In the next 10 years, I don't know if it'll necessarily be an everyday thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But one of the things, this is going to sound super corny. One of the things that I like to see the way our world is going is, and I'm not even a fan of this, but Star Trek.
Yeah,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
replicator.
The replicator. I could totally see if we're able to print off living organs now and skin grafts now, why won't we be able to print off carrots or an apple?
Yep.
Like why not? And if we're printing off stuff that's, at least from like my understanding, to me a liver seems a lot more complicated than an apple. But I don't know the insides of an apple. It could be crazy chaotic, and we just don't know. Many explosions going off in our mouth or something. But I could see that happening. Like, is there something that you would want to see coming to fruition that's not there yet, but it's like a pipe dream of yours? Like I've got a friend of mine who told me the other day, is like, if I ever have a motorcycle, it's because my wife told me she wanted to leave me. He always wanted a motorcycle, but his wife is like, absolutely not. Like, if you ever see him on a motorcycle, it's because we're done. So, like, is there something, and I'm not saying like you and your wife are getting separated, but is there something that, if you could print off, what's something beyond board games that interests you in that realm?
Yeah, this is gonna sound like a kind of a cop out, but honestly, like I feel really fortunate that I get to do the things that I would have dreamed I was doing, like just 5 years ago. So, like, I get to play in a D&D game at least twice a month. I have like printers that I get to review. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm learning about something every day. I have a job as a teacher that's really fulfilling, that allows me to have time to be able to do stuff like go to conventions and stuff. I went to my first convention last year, and that was like so cool. That was a pipe dream of mine, and so I feel really just kind of fortunate, that the Kickstarter itself was like a pipe dream. I didn't know how the community would react to it, and they believed in me. And so now it's my turn to deliver. And so that's a pipe dream that I'm living. Like, I have a Nintendo Switch, and I get to play Super Smash Brothers sometimes with my friends who live across the country. Like, that's amazing. I feel like I'm living it, Roy. I'm sorry, Rob. My
Oh,
You
all right.
did it! Yes!
And I'm out,
Before
guys.
the episode's
I'll see you
over.
I'll see you later.
Hey.
Cool. Thanks.
But I feel like I'm living it, dude, and I feel really grateful that I can, I'm in the position that I can to do what I do.
Nice. What we need is a 3D printer that can print other 3D printers, so you can print more D&D minis.
Honestly, you can do that, and there's plenty of people that have done it. There's open source plans for 3D printers that are 3D printed, except for just a handful of pieces. So,
That's
I know you
crazy.
say that tongue in cheek, but it's real. Like,
There's like I joined the Ender 3 Facebook group, and
Yeah.
I swear like half the guys in there are more obsessed with just printing more components to add to their 3D printer than actually printing like other things. It's just like, oh, upgrade this or upgrade that or upgrade that. That when I post pictures of my 3D printer and it has like no upgrades, people are like, "What are you, crazy? Like you need to upgrade this and this and this. You have that fan without a cover over it? What's wrong with you?" I'm like, I mean, I'm careful when I pull the stuff off. I don't know.
I know. I understand you more than you know, Roy. And whatever. It's like they have their hobby. I mean, for some people, like upgrading your printer is the hobby.
Yeah.
And for some people, like optimizing your output and like fine tuning your machine, like running it through calibration and all this stuff, like making it perfect is necessary. And that's not like engaging for me.
There was a dude on there that's all about speed printing things, and he didn't care about the quality. He just wanted to see how fast he could print things. He's like, look at this Benchy I made, and it looked terrible. He's like, I made this in like 2 minutes. I was like, what? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, there's a slicer or there's firmware called Clipper that like it's supposed to like make your machine move in certain ways that isn't affected by certain like physics movements or whatever. Like, I'm sorry I'm sounding so dumb here, but and I knew a guy that's like, oh my gosh, you can print the same things 1,000 times faster without the artifact. What do you think about this? And I was like, I'm not interested in like bootloading my thing right now. Like, it's gonna be a pain in the butt. I'm not gonna do that. And yeah, like that's really fun for some people, and it's not fun for me. I want to be printing stuff. I'd rather have something that's not a perfect print than to have something spend hours and hours trying to find something so then I can then print stuff out faster. I mean, I'm impatient like that.
Yeah.
Good thing I'm still having fun with it.
Yeah, for sure. So, what would you say is the craziest thing that you've 3D printed?
I haven't like printed anything too. I'm so boring, you guys. I feel like I'm such a boring like guest to come on the show because I'm like, what's the most crazy thing I 3D printed? I 3D printed some Final Fantasy coasters for my brother. Woo! Like,
that is awesome, though. I mean,
hey, we have a couple friends that would go crazy over that. AJ, if you could get a 3D printed Final Fantasy 7 coaster, yeah, he'd love that.
They were like retro, like 8-bit Final Fantasy 1 coasters, and they warped. Like, they were not good prints at all. I did my best for my brother, but like, like I printed a couple of dice towers that I like. I gave one to a cousin of mine for Christmas, and I've printed like these dragons are pretty crazy to me.
Oh yeah.
They're cool, man. Like I don't say that because I did that, but like I made dragons that I would want to put on my table. And I felt like I added something to the dragons that we already have, which are really cool and like are free in many cases. And so I kind of didn't want to tread on that ground with them, and I just wanted to add some more variety. So, yeah, hope that answers your question. Right.
Well, on the opposite side of that, what would be the worst failed print you've ever had?
Easy. I tried to print an owl bear. Okay.
All right.
And it was my first print. Like I mean, it wasn't my first print, but it was probably my first mini print, and it was by Miguel Zavala, and I had it for a long time. I don't know what happened to him. He like somehow part of his arm still ended up printing, even though it was like floating over air, and some type of mess. The mess that I had on my extruder was terrible, and then somewhere along the line that got on the miniature, and so he had this big blob on him afterwards, and then the rest of the miniature printed perfectly fine. I was like, and I didn't enable supports on it, and that was the problem. And me being so new, like I just didn't get what was wrong with my print, man. Like I was just like, how would this happen? Like I have half an arm. Like, can I glue it? And it was like the rest of it. And so I'll always forget that print. Like I've shown it on the channel in some of my early videos because it was just like, it was my first like real big failure that I think
you
I
like,
realized.
let's have a moment of silence for his arm or something?
Yes, I did that. His name is Delbert the owlbear.
That's awesome.
Yeah, But I mean, I've had plenty. I've had plenty of like wake up to blob, like on my printer.
Have you had
and
a lot
like,
of spaghetti experiences with just giant blobs of spaghetti?
yeah, whatever. That's like peanuts for me. Like, whatever.
Damn. How do you keep from getting discouraged if something messes up, or how do you troubleshoot how to solve those problems?
So, over time, I was explaining this to Rob and to Matt. Like any mechanical thing, like it just kind of comes with time, I think. You'll look on you if your like engine stops working and it's making a funny noise, you might type in a Google like engine making funny noise and find YouTube videos on it and look at that YouTube video, and what one video says is something different than another video, and so you'll start to do everything. And like little by little, you'll fix like under extrusion, for example, which is a pretty common thing to happen, and you'll be like, well, what's wrong? And then initially you'll be like, is it the temperature? And you'll up the temperature, and nothing happens when you up the temperature. And then you're like, okay, well, do I have a clog? And then you'll try to push through, and it doesn't, it pushes through just fine. And you're like, okay, well, it's not a clog. What's going on? And then you look, and your extruder is like caught, and you're like, oh, well, let me take out the extruder. And then, it's like little by little, you'll find a series of events. You'll go on Facebook, and people will tell you every solution under the sun that it could possibly be.
Level the bed. Level the bed. Level the
yeah,
bed.
I mean that's true though. Most problems stem from a bad level, honestly, or a bad tram if you want to get technical. And that is one of the skills that you have to learn to do. So for me, like learning that the middle arm, the gantry where the extruder is, which is what holds kind of the little printer, that has to be straight and has to be the same distance on both sides, was like a game-changing moment for me, because a lot of my leveling issues came from that problem. So how do I stay discouraged? I mean, honestly, this is my best advice, is like, if you need to leave the printer sitting for a week while you kind of collect yourself and stop getting frustrated with it, then do it. I had a lot of moments where I wanted to throw my machine in the trash, in the garbage, because it just wasn't working. It wasn't responding to me, and I tried everything. And I waited for a week until I was like re-energized and ready to go at the problem again, and then fixed it within a few hours, And so sometimes the fix for a printer is a 1 hour fix, and it doesn't need a lot, but you just get discouraged and you need that breather before you go back at it. And then once you get those good prints again, you're back in heaven again.
Yeah.
It's like until the next failure, which just happens, and then you just gotta go. Just gotta move on,
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest issues is I've like you said once, I forgot to click enable supports, so it's obviously like this is not gonna print without supports, like duh.
Yeah.
And then just trying to print out things that are probably too big to print out the way I print it. Like I tried to print that alternate sculpt dragon all together. Like, why would I do that? That was stupid. Like, it needs to be printed in pieces. That's why it has it all in pieces.
Some people do it, to be honest, man, and they don't mind the support removal. It's just,
I was like, I'm gonna print it. It's gonna be a pain to clean, but I'm just gonna see what it does. And this is how dumb I was. I'm like, yeah, I've been printing out stuff like fine. Everything was working great. I'm like, I'm going to set up a live stream. And it was actually on this channel. I was like, live streaming my print 24 hours, because that's how long it was going to take to print. And I woke up in the morning to a bunch of messages like, wake up, Roy, it failed. Wake up, Roy, it failed. And I like woke up and I watched the video, and for some reason, like the extruder, the little head, like it was printing and then it just went down, and I don't think it's ever supposed to go down. So I don't know what happened or why the G code failed in that way to make it go down like that. But then it just started printing over here, which is not connected to the rest of the stuff. So I was like, okay. And I felt kind of sad. I was like, scrape it up, throw it in the trash. But then I printed that same model out in different pieces and glued it all together, and it looks amazing. So
yeah,
that dragon does look good.
I thank you. I'll make sure to let the sculptor know.
Yeah,
His name's
sure.
Andrew Cothill, Recluse Studios. He's awesome. So yeah, like there's all sorts of issues, man, that probably wasn't the G code. I mean, it probably just hit some of the supports on the way and then dropped them, and then next thing you know, which can happen because of an unlevel bed, or it can happen just because the gantry moves a little bit, or the belts aren't too tight and you have layer shift that can happen. Like like I said, dude, I could start like counting off the top of my head a bunch of things that could be.
Yeah.
That's just kind of like the game, man, and that's why Rob, like when I say it's like it's still a tinkerer's hobby, man. You can buy a $700 printer and have that same issue, and
I'm not going to do that.
but like learning about some of the basics of just how the machine itself works, like an engine in a car, a $2,000 engine is going to be very similar in many ways to a $20,000 engine, and so even though it might have some extra tweaks or whatever, one might have a computer in it, but they generally work the same. And a spark plug works like a spark plug, and so like learning how a type of extruder works is just how it works. And those are just the things that come with time, man. Like there's no easy way to learn that type of a skill. And I think that's why when people misrepresent 3D printing as being like this click and play tech, sometimes it can be, but a lot of the times when things aren't working, it is not. And it takes a lot of work to get it right and learn. For some people it's natural, but I think for most there's a learning curve that's real. So
yeah. Well, sweet.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I had a ton of other crazy questions, but we ended up running into some technical issues. So, but I guess I'll just jump to, hey, what would you like to say for people out there that are interested in 3D printing, or just people that would like it to add it into their hobby? Like, what encouragement would you give them about that sort of thing? Sure.
So, I think if you're interested in it, to just start looking up videos just like you did, Roy. My channel isn't the only channel doing this type of content, but I don't know of many channels that cover it as extensively. And I don't say that to brag or boast, but I tend to focus on D&D, whereas if you want to start doing other different types of board games, I wish I had time to play more board games, but like there are so many models out there. Good luck if you decide to go on Thingiverse. If you're remotely interested and you think like, oh, like what will I print? And like just go on Thingiverse and type in your favorite games and see what comes up, and get ready to go down that rabbit hole, because you will download that night dozens of models that you'll want to print, and then you're going to have a print queue before you get a printer. And once you start looking up the videos and you start seeing some of the pros and cons, you might have a tough decision to make. But honestly, like, I recommend Amazon, because if things don't go right, or the printer isn't working quite like you expect it to, or there's some type of defect or issue, these are printers from China, dude, you can just return it within 30 days. Like, you don't have that luxury with some of the other resellers that are overseas, right? Which are still perfectly good a lot of the times. They have mixed stories about them, but honestly, there's so many people in the community that are printing the type of stuff that you probably want to print, and I just am not sure that if you're interested in it, that you know where to look. So Facebook, if you're okay with Facebook, we have a Facebook group called the Tabletop 3D Printing Guild, which we're really noob friendly, and you can come and see what people are printing. There's like a billion 3D printed board game groups. You just have to type in like 3D printed terrain and miniatures, or 3D printed board games, or whatever you want to type in, whatever keywords, you'll find it. Reddit is really big. Printed minis is a big community. 3D printed tabletop is a more neutral one, but those tend to skew towards like D&D. So, I think that there's so much room for more to go in this hobby. But every day there's new people coming on, new modelers getting on, sharing their stuff for free and paid for like higher quality models. And so, if you're interested and you're thinking about like buying into something that costs a little bit and you can spare like $250, you can get started and you can try and see if it's for you. And I think, that's about what my first like 500-point Warhammer army cost. So, I mean, if you're willing to spend a little bit of money and give it a shot, I think it's really fun. And I think there's something really special and satisfying about being able to see something kind of come that you put into a slice that you saw, and kind of just seeing it grow. It's like a Chia Pet, like the Chia Pet fun, it's just like engaging. It's just, it's made a difference for me, and it makes me really happy. And I'm glad to see so many other people enjoying it too. And of course, come on YouTube and just check it out. That's completely free. And my channel, we talk about that stuff a lot. And yeah.
I think another thing
takes
that's
me a
really
while to
cool
respond, but yeah.
is the more people that get into it, or the more people that are excited about 3D printing, the more people there are going to be making files, and the more things that everybody's going to have to print. Because like Thingiverse is such a great resource, and I'm sure there's other like websites and things like that you can go to just find free files to print out to throw in your game, which is really cool. The more things people make, the more things we can all have, So
Totally.
it's cool
Totally.
to encourage people in that way.
Absolutely. And that's kind of, there's a lot of people in the community that want that. And I think we're a pretty inclusive and a pretty supportive community. It's a good place to be. It's a good corner of the internet. So yeah.
Nice. Was there anything else you'd like to announce or talk about or promote? I know you guys wrapped up your Lost Dragons Kickstarter. Is there a way to like late pledge on that sort of thing or anything like that, or?
There sure is. So kind of unorthodox to have a late pledge several months after the Kickstarter. but here's the thing, like I've met a lot of people, Roy, like you, for example, who like I met and like you didn't even know about the Kickstarter when the Kickstarter was going on.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, I feel kind of bad. And after the late pledge, I'm still gonna probably offer like a bundle that's pretty cheap because like I think a lot of people, they can find their stuff on Thingiverse, but if they want my files, like I want them in as many hands as possible, and that's kind of my philosophy. And so the Kickstarter was to fund those models, and so the people who participated in the Kickstarter like got dragons they asked for, and we made those concepts in response to them. So like that was the joy of participating with those people, and now everybody else that finds out about later, they can reap the benefits. And then once I close it off, it'll just be a little bit more expensive without the Kickstarter exclusives. But yeah, you can go to my website, 3dprintedtabletop.com, and I have a bunch of models that are there. They are kind of challenging prints, but Roy, like you did them, so I mean, it's totally possible. I've made a lot of videos to kind of help people with.
Small, but it's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
I have a video on scaling for you, Roy. I'll send it to you after.
I'm pretty sure I've watched it. So. Need to rewatch it maybe.
But yeah, like at the end of the day, if you come to the channel and you like it, or you just like the type of models we're making a lot more Dragonborn, and now we're releasing a lot of other different types of minis that aren't available right now. But you can come and you can at least check it out. You're always welcome to engage and join with us on Facebook at the Tabletop 3D Printing Guild. I run that with several other people in the community who share their models on Thingiverse for free, and I kind of recruited those people in the community because they had an open source mentality too, and I think that putting the community first is important to me. Even if you charge for a little bit, I think doing as much you can for the community free is only going to benefit the community. And again, like there's every type of, I think, person printing there. So if you want to find other people who are interested in the games you're playing, whether that's World War II games like Bolt Action or Flames of War, or whether you're doing something like Gloomhaven, or you're doing something like D&D or Pathfinder, which I would say a majority of people are there, like you'll find the fellow geeks. And there's a lot of people there that don't have printers or are thinking about printers, and you'll find the stuff that you need and hopefully the support that you need to like feel comfortable giving it a shot, because I think there's no better time to jump in if it is something that you're interested in.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the show. It's definitely been a blast. I know we talked about it a lot, but if people want to find you, where can they find all of your stuff? Sure.
So I'm on YouTube is my like main place. I upload probably twice a month or so. My channel is called 3D Printed Tabletop, and I'm also on Facebook. 3D Printed Tabletop, and we have, again, that Facebook group, which is one of the ones I run. It's called the Tabletop 3D Printing Guild. We also have a subreddit called 3D Printing DMs, not exclusive to D&D players, but that's the name of the subreddit because there's already a 3D Printed Tabletop. So nice. That's what we did. And I'm on Instagram as well at 3D Printing DM. I'm trying to get more active, and I'm also on Twitter at 3D Printing DM as well. So you can do all the socials. But I'm probably most active on Facebook and Twitter, I would say.
Nice. or we can just hit him up on all of them like I did. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm cool with that too. I mean, I try my best to respond to as many people as I can. YouTube, there's a lot of comments on YouTube, so I don't get to respond to as many there, but and email as well. But yeah, just I appreciate you guys bringing me on and being willing to talk about this. I think this is a super exciting space, and the fact that like somebody cared to reach out is just showing that,
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if I had told you or mentioned it before, but I started doing a segment for the Dice Tower on Board Game Breakfast, specifically about 3D printing and board games.
Yeah.
So I'm just talking about, hey, this is my journey, because I'm like super beginner at this. So hey, this is me starting from the very beginning, knowing nothing, to what I can do. And I've just had the response to that's actually been like super huge, and people being like, well, where do I find these things? What do I do? And like, I've been always wanted to see. I was watching this video with my wife, and she was groaning in the background because she knew I was going to need to buy a 3D printer now. Like those sort of comments. So it's definitely super cool to see people in the board gaming side of it get excited about 3D printing as well.
Totally. I think you're doing it right, man. And it's interesting you say that, because I have a friend, his name is Kevin. I know we got to go. This is relevant, I promise. So Kevin Rank, he runs a site called Maker Fun 3D, and he was kind of he's like I call him like a historian of our culture, of our community, because he's been documenting Kickstarters and interviewing people and doing all this other stuff with people for well before I did mine. And so he reached out to, I guess, like one of the guys who started the Dice Tower. There's a lot of people working for it now. I think his name is Tom, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And he reached out to him, and he was like, I think the breakfast show would be like interesting and a perfect spot for 3D printing. And he was like, yeah, that would be cool. And now here we are, like a year and a half later, and you're like, I'm doing it. Like, you're like, I'm living it, and people love it. And it's just like, think about that. Like, if 1 year ago we were thinking about this idea, now like you guys, like huge channel like the Dice Tower, it's like it's top of mind and people are like interested, and it's like a reality. And so like you're talking about the replicator, Rob, like we're living in a time where we pretty much have a $200 replicator, and it's amazing.
So funny because Tom, like, he's trying to upgrade a ton of the games, because we have like a library of board games that we take to conventions. Like, we run conventions, so he's like trying to upgrade all these games with 3D printed components, and he's seen what I've been able to like print just like myself, and he's starting to be like, I'm spending tons of money like buying these components, which is super awesome because he's helping makers in the community like earn money. But he's like, maybe I should buy a 3D printer. So it's kind of funny. So now he's like, well, maybe we should get 3D printer for the office. So I'm like, we'll just have 3D printers everywhere. So
dude, hey man, I mean, when I went to PAX Unplugged, I interviewed quite a bit of different people in different spaces, and I made a video about it. And one of the things I talked to was just like an indie board gamer, and he was just like 3D printing inserts for his game that would have cost him a lot of money to make otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like, this is it's awesome that Tom's thinking about that. And I think a lot more people, it's democratizing that sort of manufacturing, I think, for like indie board games. It's amazing. It's an amazing time. Super cool. I definitely want to cover that. And I know Dice Tower's in Orlando. Maybe I'll come on the show sometime. I'd love to. That'd be cool.
Awesome, man. Well, we stream these at youtube.com/Epic Gaming Night at Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much to everybody who joined us in chat. You guys are awesome. Also, make sure to check out our Patreon at youtube.com/Epic Gaming Night if you're interested in supporting the show. Shout out to all of our amazing patrons. And also, if you want to check out any of the things that Epic Gaming Night is doing, make sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Epic Gaming Night. Make sure to check out Rob at writing.newman and Matt at Shades of the Mind. And, of course, Danny at all of his social media. Hype! Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much, man.
We do appreciate it.
It was really fun. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.